Hello and welcome to the first ever episode of The Current State. My name is Dhruv.
And my name is Qasim, and here at The Current State, we focus on current global news affecting young people. And here's what we have for you today.
What are the key takeaways from Keir Starmer's conference speech last week?
What is the latest news on Trump's 20-point peace plan for Gaza?
And why are there record lows in employment in the G7 countries?
But first, we take a look at why the Senate closing in America is important. Dhruv, can you explain what this really means?
Yeah, so basically the government closes when spending cannot legally continue, and this is usually because of key disagreements which do not allow a new act to pass. The current disagreement is that Democrats want to see an extension of expiring tax credits, which make healthcare cheaper, and they also oppose the proposed Republican spending cuts to government health agencies. The impact of this is that many non-essential federal services are halted or simply reduced, with many government employees being furloughed or placed on unpaid leave. And it's really not that uncommon. There's been 11 of them since 1976. And in America especially, they're often seen as political bargaining tools. However, there are concerns that this may last for a long time, which could have potentially serious economic consequences. They usually last around a day or two, but the last one was the longest in 2018 under the Trump administration, which lasted 35 days. But Carson, this problem is really uniquely American. Why does that happen?
Well, America has unique laws that allow the government to operate without a budget. This is different from other countries. For example, Belgium has gone without government for long periods of time, but the old budget stays in effect until a new budget is passed. In other countries, like Canada or Australia, budgets have to be passed, or the government is usually forced to resign, and then Parliament will get dissolved. It's been seen before, for example, Australia in 1975. Within the UK itself, it's basically impossible, because obviously we have the idea of provisional funding being available.
We obviously slightly touched upon previously about the impacts of the shutdown. Could you go into more detail of what these potentially could be?
Of course. So obviously it's going to heavily affect employees of the federal government itself, which is the largest employer in America. We have over 3 million people working there. And in the latest Congressional Budget Office report, which if you want to have a look at it, is dated September 30th of 2025, said that about total daily cost of their compensation would be roughly $400 million. So you can see the economic problems that this would cause. Also, the essential personnel, like people in the military, for example, would be exempt, and they won't get paid until the new bill is passed. And that could lead to many workers being laid off.
Yeah, definitely. And in terms of if you're a resident in the UK or in other parts of the world and you're planning on traveling to America, there's a few key things to keep in mind. For example, TSA has said that if you're flying into America, you should expect longer wait times. This is because some employees choose to just stay at home rather than work for free. And the reason for this, which union representatives have highlighted, is that many of them like to seek alternative opportunities to maintain income during this period of time. And obviously, this is a fairly serious issue for America, and there are two key ways it can be resolved. And it comes down to either the Democrats or the Republicans backing down and allowing the bill to pass. So for the Democrats, they need to break ranks. So at the moment, the Republicans have 53 seats within the Senate, and the Democrats have 45. That's out of 100 in total, with the rest being independent, and 60 votes are needed for a law to pass. Under the latest Republican bill, the Senate voted 55-45, with 2 Democrats and 1 Democrat-sided independent voting for the Republicans. So basically what this means is that more Democrats need to vote for the Republican bill for this to happen. However, this seems fairly unlikely due to the disagreements over spending on government health agencies. The other potential way this can be resolved is if the Republicans make concessions. However, they do feel like they're negotiating from a position of strength, but obviously with the elections coming up, the public may look unfavorably upon the Republicans if they continue to hold the firm ground. which may force them to have to make concessions so they don't lose public support. So those are the two ways you can really see this ending, but at the moment it does still look like a stalemate in America. So obviously we had huge news from Donald Trump recently over his proposed Gaza peace plan. Qasim, what's the latest in it?
Yeah, so we have Hamas, who are still stalling at the moment. They need to accept the more complex part of the 20-point peace plan. And Trump is imperative that he wants no delay. And if delay continues, he will consider the agreement off, which would be not good for anyone. If we take a little bit of a backtrack to what's happened this month with Gaza to kind of understand the full situation about the conflict, we have the Hamas chief on the 9th of September being subject to many attempted assassination. Since then, it's actually been looking much better. On the 29th of September, we have the release of the 20-point peace plan by Donald Trump and Benjamin Netanyahu. Benjamin Netanyahu was very supportive. He said that he agreed with every element of the peace plan, and he said he would welcome any effort to end military and war/terror operations. Netanyahu, however, on the following day, said that he was this is on X by the way, he was strongly against the idea of forming a Palestinian state to govern the area, emphasizing that this was not written in the agreement. However, it did say in the 20-point peace plan that a Palestinian body would lead the country. And at the same time, the IDF in the last few days has effectively laid siege to Gaza City, which is the capital of Gaza. And they've allowed members to leave if they want, announcing that anyone who stays in the so-called last Hamas stronghold will be seen as a supporter of terror, which is interesting. So the military operations are actually ongoing during the conflict. You would think that in some kind of ceasefire negotiations, they would maybe back down slightly. However, they didn't. So Dhruv, can you explain some parts of the agreement itself?
Yeah, so obviously there's quite a few key elements that stand out. So just to go through a few of them, Gaza will become a terror-free zone with no threat to neighboring states. Another one being that Israeli forces will retreat to a given line in order for all living and dead hostages to be released. And this really marks a significant moment in the conflict. Members of Hamas will also be given the right to leave Gaza if needed, and Gaza will be governed by a temporary Palestinian committee. So this is quite interesting. But what actually is Hamas's response to all of this?
Yeah, so immediately they were actually quite skeptical because they weren't involved in the peace plan discussions. They obviously consider themselves to be quite a major party, and so they were quite annoyed when they heard that this peace plan had been made without them. They agreed on most parts of the peace plan, and they sent a conditional response back to Trump, which agreed with ideas, for example, of the hostages being released, and they liked the temporary ceasefire as well. However, they are also concerned about the Palestinian people themselves. They want to make sure that the Palestinian people are in line with the agreement because this agreement lacks detail in terms of the future, in terms of who's governing, when they will start governing, and with what kind of system they'll govern. And all of this needs to be clarified for peace to truly be restored. So Dhruv, do you think that there is any potential success for this agreement? And do you think that we can finally see this 2-year conflict ending?
Yeah, I think with the momentum and the speed at which the deal occurred, it is quite likely that there will be a temporary ceasefire of sorts and hopefully a release of all hostages. It's just whether this agreement withstands remains to be seen. Of course, previous ceasefires have been broken, such as the one earlier this year in March. And in the long term, the state of Gaza/Palestine seems to be undecided. So, Trump does seem incredibly certain that this will restore peace to Palestine.
However, for that peace to be restored, I think lots of changes have to be made to the 20-point peace plan. For example, as I said before, it lacks detail on the future. Who will actually take over Gaza? It seems to be focused more on the military and hostage aspect of the conflict, and its main objective is to make the ceasefire occur now. But the long-term state of Gaza isn't really considered. And this is why I think this agreement has kind of got a very high buzz and hype about it, because obviously conflict ends and all the public are happy. And obviously you have the confusion between what Netanyahu said after it's been released and what the 20-point peace plan says explicitly. Netanyahu was very strongly opposed to a Palestinian Authority running the country, whereas in the 20-point peace plan itself, it's very clear that a Palestinian Authority will run the country. And if that agreement or that part of the agreement is to be changed, we will obviously have to wait because the talks are still ongoing in Egypt, which is one of the mediators at the moment.
Awesome. Thank you, Qasim. And now we're going to move on. And Qasim, we've seen some really concerning trends within the G7 countries recently. Would you be able to elaborate on that?
Yeah, so recently we've been seeing record lows in employment in the G7 countries. Labour markets in many of those countries seem to be freezing up due to uncertainty over many things, for example, trade. But the main thing is artificial intelligence, or AI, because we don't know the capabilities of AI in the future. It could be at a point where it has the ability to eliminate certain industries or create. Due to this reason, employers are putting off laying off workers, and certain employers stick with their jobs, and hence employment has been stagnating. So, if we look at the G7 countries, which for clarification are the United States, United Kingdom, Japan, Italy, Germany, France, and Canada. These are obviously known to have some of the strongest economies in the world. At the moment, they all rank top 10 for GDP and extremely high for GDP per capita as well. So, it's obvious that these countries have very strong, healthy economies. But we have seen that employment in the US, for example, grew at a yearly rate of just 0.5%. In the other G7 economies, in the last 3 months, it's only been 0.4%. And that is quite concerning, considering the might and the strength of these economies in the future. So, Dhruv, can you expand on some of the main causes of this stagnation?
Yeah, I mean, the US economy especially seems to be going under a period of reformation from labor and workforce-led economies into capital and AI focus as well. AI has a lot of potential benefits, like its fast processing and automation, as well as numeracy, which could lead to increased productivity and better quality analysis within the economy generally. However, at the moment, it is hard to predict the effects of AI on the labor market in the future, but it is likely that in certain industries, so if I was to give an example, you could say the financial or legal industry, where there's a huge amount of analysis that occurs, which AI can simply do in a short period of time, or an industry such as customer service, where calls can simply be handled 24/7 by AI chatbots.
Yeah, so obviously there are loads of drawbacks with AI, but obviously AI has the potential to benefit the economy. Some industries won't be eliminated, but some tasks that occur by workers will just simply be changed, because AI and humans together actually is seen as the best combination in order to increase or maximize productivity in the economy. Industries like engineering or data science are thought to be going into way more depth due to the developments in artificial intelligence. Also, there are other external reasons for the stagnation in employment that are separate from AI. For example, job security is seen as decreasing over the last few months. Longer commutes have obviously higher costs, and this has put workers off in terms of job satisfaction as well. And inflation rates obviously lead to public transport costs increasing, and so another reason for commutes becoming more expensive. Obviously, this is actually why I have decided personally to go into economics and data science. As I said before, data science is one of the big and upcoming industries that is set to be expanded due to AI, and the demand for data scientists in various industries such as finance, business, even sport are very promising to me, and that's why I've chosen to do that.
Yeah, I mean, even if you look at other industries, so for young people watching the podcast who may be thinking about what they want to do, another potential industry could be law, for example, where lawyers are required to have a certain amount of emotional thinking that AI can't replicate in any way. That doesn't apply to the whole industry within law. There's certain jobs within law, such as one of a paralegal who researches tasks which may not be safe from AI, as AI is very efficient at researching even now and is already starting to take jobs of paralegals in the world.
So Dhruv, I saw you watching Keir Starmer's latest conference speech earlier this week. What are your key takeaways?
Yeah, I think the main key takeaway was the heavy focus on Reform UK. So Keir Starmer has made it incredibly clear. He doesn't see the Conservative Party as its main challenger in the next election. despite them being the traditional competitor for power. And I think this is based off statistics as well, because from the latest gov.uk data, it shows that Reform lead the current pollings. They hold 29% currently and are ahead of Labour and the Conservatives by 8 and 13% respectively, which is quite a sizable lead. Other key news that came out of this conference was the change in education target. The previous target was that 50% of kids should go to university, which was set at near the end of the 20th century, and that's been updated. Keir Starmer is saying that 66% of kids should go to uni or a gold standard apprenticeship. The difference being here the focus on the apprenticeship side of things.
Thank you, Dhruv. Next week, stay in tune. We will have a special guest on the podcast, and we will have video available as well. So stay tuned for next week. Thank you very much, and have a great week.